There will be no points awarded for guessing the basic premise of City on Fire, a movie which arrived at the tail end of the 70s disaster boom. But let's find out if it ends the decade in a blaze of glory. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter and I'm joined as always by David.
You gotta drag on it, meathead.
This is a movie podcast. We work through different themes and seasons of movies, and this current season is 70s disaster movies. And this week's movie is City on Fire, a lesser known 70s disaster film from 1979. Not to be confused with the, I think, Kung Fu action movie from 1987.
There's like 50 different City on Fires. There's books, there's TV shows.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's a catchy title. I get it.
Oh yeah,
that's what it is. So we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you warning before we go into the spoilers. But the premise is fairly simple. There's a fictional city, which I actually at the start of the movie was trying to figure out which city it was supposed to be, and then I sort of checked, and it said an unnamed American city. I was like, oh, it's meant to be ambiguous. Okay.
See, it's weird because this is just a tiny little thing I know, is that it's supposed to be an American city, but the cable call sign that they keep using throughout is most definitely a Canadian call sign, because it starts with the letter C. So it's truly just somewhere in North America.
I mean, they did shoot some of it in Canada, because I did read briefly on Wikipedia that they look for like a street or two that they could like set fire to. So they were looking for like streets that are abandoned that we can do whatever we want to with. You know, the city will let us burn it to the ground. Excellent. You know, back when movies had to do that because they couldn't, didn't have CG to just fake it. So
yeah, I still feel like they may have gone a little bit far, but we'll get to that.
So we'll get into everything, but there's an oil refinery that the corrupt mayor, played by Nielsen, has sort of like been behind the construction of, and it's in the middle of the city, and it's kind of dangerous. And a lot of the stuff that he's helped put into the city infrastructure have all been a little bit backdoor shady deals. They've all been kind of underfunded. They're all a little bit more dangerous than they should be, which is kind of the backdrop of the movie's events. But everything kicks off when a disgruntled worker at the oil refinery decides to act out, and I'll leave it there for now. We'll get into in spoilers what the actual happenings are. But would you believe it? It leads to the city being on fire, and
what
the brand new hospital needs to deal with all the patients and try and evacuate because they're all going to suffocate. And there's a bunch of, and as with any disaster movie, there's a whole ensemble. Ava Gardner, who was in like one of the other movies we did, is back as like a news anchor, and she's like a recurring character throughout. The head doctor at the hospital is a recurring character. Nielsen as the mayor is a recurring character. The disgruntled employee from the refinery, he's a recurring character. And there's a few other smaller ones as well. The police, or the fire chief, I should say, played by Henry Fonda, who, I'll say it, he felt like he was phoning it in. He's an older man here, and he's just like,
This movie came out in 1979, and Fonda died in 1982, so this was one of his last roles, all things considered.
Not much of a swan song, but he got to basically just stay in the same room and just sort of say things to, like, a headset or...
Yeah, I'm thinking back to the movie now, and I don't... Besides the very first scene, does he ever leave that room?
I mean, technically, you see him in his office, which is like just off to that sort of command center room. Yeah. But other than that, no. Like his very first scene where he's outside talking to his son, who's a high-ranking captain in the fire department.
Right.
He basically just spends all of it in the command center, like arranging things.
I have no basis for this at all, but I genuinely do think that like Henry Fonda's role probably could have been cut if they didn't get Henry Fonda, and they were just like, no, we're just gonna, you show up for 2 days, we'll get everything you need, and then you can go on back home.
Yeah. They wanted a big star name to to add to the list of names at the on the poster or whatever, which is fine. You know, they're selling their movie and all that stuff. But yeah, anyway, that's the movie. So without further ado, David, what did you make of City on Fire?
So, City on Fire is very flashy. It has a lot of big stunts and a lot of big practical effects. That being said, I genuinely couldn't feel less for the characters if they were kicking puppies. Like, these no character in this at any point in the movie was I like, yeah, I care about whether you make it out of this or not. I don't know. It was just at no point in this movie did they do anything to really focus in on any particular character's plot. For instance, we had the news anchor and the host and all that, the executive producer. It seemed like there was some back plot going on of like she's an alcoholic and they're trying to tell a story and whatnot. But then by the end of it, nothing's changed. And then you have this photographer subplot. Nothing changed. Like, nobody learns or changes or does anything better, save for perhaps our leads. But beyond that, it is generally just, hey, look how much fire we can put into one city. It's an entire city on fire. Get it?
Yeah, I will say that the practical effects when they are, I mean, there's also this recurring thing where it'll do this shot of like a miniature, and it's like they've just got the sky looking kind of orange, and it looks a bit just weak and fake.
It reminded me of Ghostbusters when like the Zool thing was going on top.
It doesn't look like what the real city skyline would look like if this was going on, but all the stuff they do practically, which is like the initial explosions at the refinery, people falling off things, some like workers in the sewers getting set on fire and they're kind of like walking and stumbling, like all that stuff looks great. And then the initial spread of the fire that you see, you know, across like the fuel line that it's happening on looks really cool too. It was nice to see all those practical things. So I'd praise all that, but that's pretty much it, because you mentioned not really caring about the characters. I would agree with that. I would also say that once things really get going and we're actually into the midst of the disaster, I don't really think there's that many like fun, like, you know, problems and like solving those problems. It kind of all boils down to a very much the same thing happening over and over again towards the end of the film, and it felt a little contrived to me, and I wasn't really sure. Like, I'm no expert. I'm not a firefighter. I don't know how fire works beyond, you know, what everyone else knows in terms of basic fire safety. But it felt like people were just spontaneously combusting because they can catch fire for no reason. And like, there was lots of phrases been thrown around, and I'm like, is a firestorm a real thing? You know,
I googled it. No, it is not.
And then they start talking about water tunnels, and I just like there was a lot of stuff in the back half of the film that just felt really made up to create something that they could do. And I'm like, there's so many like simple ideas you could do to give them these like little obstacles that could be exciting to deal with, and and whatever. And it all just boils down to going down a street that happens to be mostly on fire.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too much into that street because it is pretty spoilery, but there was one part of that, I guess that really is the set piece to the movie, is that street. There was one point where this woman who she doesn't want to wait, and she goes down the street, and she literally does just spontaneously combust.
I actually went back.
She gets nowhere near any fire. And
I was so confused that I went back 30 seconds just to see it again. See, did I miss something? Did I miss like some sort of fireball or something? And she just kind of starts to be on fire, and they kind of present this idea that it's so hot and there's so much fire that people, it's like they're all doused in gasoline, and at any moment any spark hits them and they'll just go up. And it felt a little bit phony to me, because all I could think of was that with this street, I was like, yeah, okay, obviously it's dangerous because there's fire on all the buildings on either side, but like, I feel like I could run down that street and I'd probably be fine.
Oh, absolutely. This exists in some parallel world where if it gets to be above like 400 degrees, you just catch on fire.
Yeah.
Like that's what this world is.
Don't get me wrong, yes, the smoke is an issue. Like, the breathing would be the harder part of it, no doubt. But it's also not that long a stretch, but they kind of treat it like it's this, like, you know, it's almost like in another movie, like, this would be, like, they have to make a bridge because there's this, like, crevice, and they have to get past the crevice. But it's literally just walking down the street. And it doesn't... Nothing ever convinced me that it wasn't safe to just go down the street.
Well, there was that one point, like a little bit before the set piece, where there was a car accident. Like a car literally just explodes and catches on fire and crashes. And I thought that was going to be the obstacle they had to overcome. But in the end, I think they just decided, like, nope, we don't want to deal with that. We're just going to find another way. Which, I guess, but it just kind of takes away from, like you said, those obstacle moments, the things that these disaster films are built for. Yeah,
it feels like there's not enough in it, and it, you know, it's just not like a super short movie. It's like an hour 45, but it feels like it. You know, I got to a point where I looked at the runtime and realized, oh, I've only got like 15 minutes left. It didn't feel like I should be near the end. It felt like, oh, you've not actually set up enough stuff yet to overcome. So where's the rest of my movie?
Yeah, I mean, I also think that this movie is strange in, like, what the disaster actually is, because
this was something else I was going to bring up, because, like, the refinery explodes and people feel it around the city, and obviously I get the idea that the fire can spread to a lot of different things, and eventually, before you know it, you know, lots of stuff can be engulfed, but it kind of feels like it feels like other places just catch fire that are at a distance for no reason, and it also feels like there's little earthquakes happening all over the place because of this explosion. I don't know, like, it felt like so many... It just felt like there was so many little disasters happening around the city because of this central thing that it didn't feel like should be happening because of the central thing.
I mean, yes and no. I think that, yeah, you're right in that none of those things should have been happening. But the point I was bringing up was the fact that the core central focus is this earth-shattering kaboom at the oil refinery. And we focus on that for maybe 15 minutes before all of a sudden everything is diverted to, yes, but what about the hospital? Yeah. Like, the rest of this town, yeah, sure, whatever. It's on fire. Who cares? But the hospital, it was just built.
It was just built. No, I mean, I'll do the one positive here is that for that 5-10 minutes when you actually see all the explosions happening and all the people falling off of pipes and stuff at the refinery, great 5 minutes. That 5 minutes is spectacular. It all looks great.
There was one moment that it started making me question whether or not this is supposed to be a light comedy. And it was, you know, earth-shattering kaboom happens, and then we see all of the, like, a soccer field, all the players are, like, shaking, and then, like, a grocery store, all the stuff's just falling off the shelves. And then they cut to a dude on a toilet, and his entire stall around him just collapses. And he's just left sitting there like, what the heck, man? Yeah, and I was like, was that a comedy beat? In the scene where everything falls apart, was that a comedy beat?
Yeah, so many of these little things that they show in this montage is, like, of people being affected by this around the city. All I could think was, like, they did not do it. Either they didn't do any research for, like, how this would actually affect anything, or they just did not care and they just wrote whatever they felt like.
I guarantee you they just did not care. They just want, because again, this movie is 100% action set pieces. There were no less than 10 different people on fire for extended periods of time in this movie.
And they're all the best scenes because they all looks good.
Yeah. Exactly. But that's where they wanted to do the focus. They want to do these big action scenes. I would say best shot in the whole movie. I don't even know what building it is, but there is just a building that is just exuding flames. I think they hold on it for like 20 seconds.
I think this was a miniature because they show this is like the same building they show in the opening credits, and you see it later on in fire. I think it's just like a miniature, this one, but it looked good. Yeah, like it was this very hypnotic shot of just all the flames coming out of this. But and do you know what the funny thing is that this isn't necessarily like, if I compare it to Volcano for a moment, if I will, right? A 90s disaster movie where a volcano rises out of the ground in Los Angeles and there's lava going down the streets. Obviously a very silly premise. Science is obviously betrayed many times in the logic of that movie. But at least that movie always gave you some stupid, as stupid as it may be, they always gave you a reason why the next thing was happening based on what's already happened. I feel like it's not just that this movie gives you some sort of bullshit explanation. It just doesn't give you any explanation. They just start acting as if these other things are happening, and there's no like through line. So as silly as something like Volcano is, I actually think Volcano makes more sense to me when I watch it, because at least the writers, the characters have been written to say something. That's X and Y cause Z.
Yeah, it's internal logic.
Yes.
Even if it's not consistent with external logic, it is still consistent within itself.
Yeah. Whereas this movie, it's just all willy-nilly. There's just things happening and whatever. We spend like 30 minutes or so introducing all the characters. We have kind of like a mini disaster before the real disaster happens, so we'll get into that as well in spoilers.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on. One of the big characters we didn't mention, actually, I forgot to mention like the rich woman, Diana, who... Yes. It was, you know what, they kept up at Diana's back, and there's all this press going to see Diana, and it was impossible not to think about Princess Diana when they kept saying Diana 100 million times.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so she's actually funded, or in part funded, the hospital. She's donated $3 million to this hospital, and that's why she's there. She's there for the opening ceremony, and yes, so
and apparently she had a thing with this main lead doctor guy. She has a thing with Leslie Nielsen, and she also was married to a governor, which is how she got her money.
Yeah, the governor passed away, but she married him when she was young, but seemingly has had a number of affairs in the in the time of that marriage. So the doctor is the only one that's age appropriate, though. Like Leslie Nielsen and this governor were both supposedly, much older. Yeah,
I mean, in fairness, they do specifically point out that she was going like for much older men. Like the governor was apparently like 30 years older. So
they say that she got married like right out of high school to someone who was like 50. So yeah. I mean, thrilling.
That's how she gets $3 million to throw away. That's how you do it.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was set up in the first half hour that I thought was going to be a bigger deal, and it ended up just being like minor points later on in the film.
Yeah.
So
that's how I felt about the entire secondary cast. Like I kept on thinking like, oh, here's the ensemble. They're going to all have input on this disaster and being able to use their specific talents to overcome specific obstacles. But then in the end, it's like, no, we just want the doctor, the mayor, and the rich lady. Everyone else can go home.
Pretty much. Yeah. All right, I just give spoiler warning because I don't know what else to say without talking about what happens. There's not a whole lot of depth to this one, which I don't necessarily go to a disaster movie looking for depth per se, but like we found this surprising enough. Maybe not the Big Bus, because the Big Bus was a comedy, but like Poseidon Adventure and Cassandra Crossing both had some meat in the bones, especially Cassandra Crossing by the end. Like, I had a lot of interesting things to talk about. I don't know if there's the same interesting layer to this one. It's more just, let's look at all the things they set up in the first 30 minutes that do very little with the rest of the movie. Like, they could have done something with it. I thought there was going to be plot beats here. So we're in spoilers. The opening like half hour of the movie, it introduces all the characters, and it introduces like a number of characters that I thought were going to be, or at least the plots that they represent were going to be a bigger deal. For example, Diana's back in town, and she meets the mayor at a hotel, and he gets all smoochy with her. We're introduced, and we see him repeatedly before this scene finally happens, but we see like there's a photographer on a roof, and it's someone who's like waiting to catch them in the act. So he's like a paparazzi or whatever, right? He wants to make a career of these like lewd photos of this affair that's happening. And there's actually a really funny scene where him and his partner are in the dark room later when they develop the photos, and they start singing a song about how excited they are that they're going to like have a career based on this. But then like one of them like gets like burned alive practically, trying to like get his photos out of the dark room because their building's on fire. Which again, great effect. He stumbles out in fire onto the road and gets hit by a car. The whole thing was great. Like, there's like a 30-second segment here that just looked great.
See, you say that, it looked great, and I agree. But then I'm like, this dude ran into a burning building. He caught on fire. The photos did not. And then he gets hit by a car. Like, none of this follows any sort of like, yeah, that seems realistic, sure.
I'm sure this was obviously a safety thing for the stunt person, you know, with the fire effects and stuff. But every time someone gets set on fire, they were all drenched in, I assume, like either water or some sort of protective gel that they use when they're getting set on fire.
I think I could be entirely wrong on this, but I remember seeing something about fire stuntmen being covered in like basically alcohol, like something that it's just a layer that will burn off clean on its own.
Okay.
And you'll be safe underneath.
But yeah, I really noticed his hair being wet, and there was no like reason in the scene that he should be wet.
No.
So, you know, it's not really a critique, it's just an observation, but you know, it stuck out to me. So that basically goes nowhere other than that, like the burned guy who's still kind of slightly alive, like runs into Diana at the hospital and is like, I've got these photos. I've got it. And then the photos end up in the hands of like another character who we have to talk about him in his own. He's his own.
Oh yeah, we definitely do. Yeah,
he's his own beast. But you know, he doesn't do anything with the photos either. The photos go nowhere, and nothing ever really comes up from them. So it's like, okay, because typically what I'd expect is that either her or maybe the mayor would make a decision because they, you know, before they're in other danger, or maybe whilst they're in the midst of the disaster. What I would expect to happen is that one of them, probably the mayor, because he's the more nefarious of the two, would make a decision that would put other people in danger because he's more concerned about like protecting his reputation because he wants to be governor or something, you know, and that would present one of the problems that that the group face over the course of the film. But that doesn't happen. Nothing happens with them.
Nah. I do. That's one thing in this movie that from the very beginning, everyone is so awful.
Oh yeah.
Like specifically the one that focuses on the most is the news organizations, because they have this entire thing. I mean, if we're getting into it even slightly, the first mini disaster is a boy, he smokes, he drops his cigarette, and his entire house catches on fire.
Do you know, for a second here, because I didn't know about the oil refinery yet, I was sort of thinking, is this really what's going to start the whole fire?
Same. Absolutely.
This kid's going to have a lot on his conscience, honestly.
Oh, no. He's straight therapy for like 20 years of, yes, I set an entire city on fire because I smoked. Speaking of which, one of my other favorite lines of this movie was his younger sister was trapped in the building. She passes out from like smoke inhalation, and when she does get out of the building, she's being loaded up into a ambulance, and he comes up to her and he's like, please don't die, Deb. I promise I'll never smoke again. And I'm like, is this really a drug PSA? Are we just throwing that in the middle of this movie?
I mean, it's a good lesson for many reasons, one of which is, she won't set the entire city on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. But the point I was working towards was that the news place, they send out reporters, they're watching this building catch on fire, and the reporter there is just, he's like, excuse me, ma'am, is your daughter caught inside? Do you think she's dead? Please give us a comment on your dead
and she's
daughter.
Just crying and like, please leave me alone. And she's like, all I want to do is like try and like see if my daughter's okay. And you know, the firefighters are going in, and one of the firefighters does die. That's kind of her first, you know, death of the film and whatever. But they're like, this reporter, not only that, like there's even like just every single thing that comes out of his mouth is like he's harassing like Fonda's son, who's at the scene, you know, directing the firefighters. And I'm like, they're in the middle of trying to save a life. And actually, one thing that really bugged me about him as well is he kept, when he was reporting like to the camera, he kept saying, oh, they're getting back in to save their buddy. Yeah, their buddy. They're going to save their like what? No, they're going to save a fellow firefighter who became trapped. Like what?
They're going in to save their lover.
But he said it like 3 times. He kept referring to them as, oh, they're going to save their buddy. Their buddy's in there. It's dangerous. They have to get their buddy out. It's like, they're not just friends.
That scene definitely struck me as like, hey, we need you to just be constantly saying something, and we're not actually going to script you on what to say, but here's the gist of it. And it just so happened that actor, his thing that popped in his head was buddy.
Yes. So, yeah, he kept saying it. Whatever. But, I mean, ultimately, this is a reason why like the mother and son are at the hospital. Not that they really do anything at the hospital, other than just people that we recognize that are in danger later. So that's basically it.
Which, I mean, literally anybody... she could have been there for like a stubbed toe or like a
Yes.
fever. But no, they had to have a smaller fire before the bigger fire.
I mean, if I'm trying to like be generous here, right, and say what this maybe the point of this could have been had it been like a tighter script and actually been attempting to say something, is that this kid starting this fire and then feeling regret is supposed to foreshadow that the mayor character is supposed to go through an arc where he feels regret for this is his fault effectively because he made all these decisions for all the wrong reasons, and the idea that this kid immediately feels guilt and immediately understands that he did something wrong and this is his fault and he has to own up to it is supposed to be an example of how this is supposed to go before the mayor's reluctant to accept his part in everything. I don't think that's actually in the movie, but I think in theory that's what it could be.
I mean, if we're going with the mayor even briefly here, he starts off and the news reporter, the woman played by Gardner, she says all these horrible things. Oh, the mayor's doing bad things. She doesn't actually really give any examples. She just says, oh, he's doing bad things. So we're led to believe, yes, he is corrupt. But then he doesn't do anything that bad, and he immediately is all in on helping with the fire.
Yeah,
so there was no arc for him.
I would say it's less that he was corrupt, because it's not like he's necessarily... He's just taking cheap deals. So maybe corruption is not the right word. It's not necessarily he's taking bribes per se. He's just...
He's skipping corners.
He's skipping corners for advantages or whatever.
Yeah.
That stuff is kind of weird with him. They also set up this thing early on with his character that one of his decisions has led to the city's water pressure supply is like half as much as it should be, and that also didn't play into it. I thought that was going to lead to a thing where the firefighters literally would have no water to fight the fire, so there was going to be another obstacle where they have to somehow like reroute water from another city or something to like get the water in so they could fight the fire. And no, never.
No.
Like the only time it ever really comes up is that when they're doing the water tunnel, if you will, and Leslie Nielsen's character is the one who's like, spraying the hose from the hospital on their end. He says, this water won't hold out for much longer, so we've got on a bit of a time crunch, and that's it.
But literally, it never ran out.
No, it never ran out.
You say that, but it never ran. The only reason that we had any sort of scene at the end where it was an issue was that the hose itself ruptured.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie consistently, throughout the entire thing, sets up like 50 different Chekhov's guns. And then in the end, it's like, actually, we're going to use the sword. Never mind.
Yeah, so... And, because the whole thing, basically, like, the only thing that really happens to the characters at the end is that Diana, the rich lady, and the head doctor decide that, maybe we'll be a couple. Maybe... Because he's set up at the start as being this guy who has a lot of one-night stands. He's we don't realise it, I think, in the opening scene at his place with his, like, lady friend, but she ends up being, like, the kids' nurse at the hospital later on. But he has one-night stands. He doesn't like commitments. But at the end of the film, him and Diana are going to try and make it work. That's the closest you get to any kind of arc or any kind of thing happening.
Which isn't that clearly what you would get out of a city being on fire is commitment.
Do you know what's so funny is I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw the first few episodes of 5 Days at Memorial, which is the show that was based about the true events of the hospital during the Katrina. Right, and it was like all these decisions and all the obstacles but this was all based in true story. I don't know how much they maybe embellished for the sake of drama, but that was fairly riveting because it was like, these are all natural problems that are coming up. They're losing power, there's flooding, like these are all the issues that are coming up. We've got all these patients we have to help and deal with, like, and I'm watching this and like it all just boils down to we have to get the patients out. Oh, we could just go down the street. There's no intricacies to it. There's no...
I mean, the part that got me the most is the fact that, and again, it leads towards is this like kind of light comedy? Because throughout all of this, these amazing set pieces, this entire city block that they have literally set on fire through practical effects, in the end, when you really boil it down, the major final obstacle that they have decided to overcome is Leslie Nielsen sprays you with a hose and you walk 500 feet.
Yes, that's it. That's the entire thing.
That's it.
It's not quite as bad as like if you're a patron or a YouTube member and you've seen the bonus episode where we did Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. There's a scene in that where they're jumping over a hole, but the hole is so small that it like they're pretending that it's this big deal, and it's like, no, I can jump that.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I don't know if this is better or worse than that. It's probably better, and at least there's a lot of cool fire going on around them, so at least there's some visuals to
but
it.
that almost makes it worse in that they set up this entire set piece, but the best story they could come up with to use it was, all right, you're gonna walk from here to there.
Yes.
They couldn't think of any cooler thing to be doing in that time. And there was at the very end, the doctor guy gets trapped behind like some extra fire that came out of nowhere. And he has to get past it. And Leslie Nielsen's guy like, come on, come on. And it ends up being that the doctor runs up a ramp and jumps through the fire. And I was fully expecting them to do like the full slow motion of him like coming out like through the fire itself with his lab coat trailing behind him. But no, they did it in real time and he didn't even stick the landing. He just kind of tumbled onto the ground. I was like, all right, that kind of just explains the whole movie right there.
Yeah, so we have to talk about Herman.
Herman. Good old Herman.
Yeah, Herman is the character who we're introduced at the start of the film by seeing his wife first, who's like doing like, you know, household chores. She's like vacuuming or something. And she's actually probably the most likable character in the whole movie. She feels like this innocent character.
Say that she has literally 3 lines.
Well, that's my point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fair. All right, good
like,
enough.
She's sympathetic because she's married to a psychopath who not only does he do all the things that he's going to do because of like a job thing, which we'll get to in a second, but he's also clearly obsessed with this Diana lady because so the wife notices that he's on TV because there's a news program playing about Diana arriving in the city. Oh, that's the princess of the city. It's like Bruce Wayne coming back to Gotham. Like, the princess of the city's arriving here in the airport, and she notices her husband in the background. He's in like the crowd at the airport, and he's like, "Hey, Herman, you're on TV. Like, why were you at the airport?" And he doesn't really answer, right? And at the time, we don't know either, like why he's there. It's like, you know, whatever. There could be any reason, but later on in the movie, he starts talking to like a coworker about how he went to school with Diana. He was starting high school as she was leaving, and it's like
no, the reverse.
Oh, is it the reverse?
She was starting as he was leaving,
and he was like, okay, so they're doing this thing where he was there because he's like into her, maybe obsessed. And then, of course, after he does his big thing in the middle that kickstarts the whole disaster, like his plan is to go buy a nice suit and then go to the press conference at the hospital where she is so that he can try and talk to her. And then he tries to talk to her a few times while they're in the hospital helping patients. So, like, this guy is delusional and is trying to, like, worm his way in with this woman that he knows is rich.
Yeah. Honestly, it's only once the movie ended that, you know, I sat down and I thought about it. And I was like, okay, probably everything that happened there was part of whatever plan he came up with. Because during the movie watching it, I thought that his plan only extended as far as I'm going to mess up this oil refinery and then I'm going to go to the hospital. I didn't think that it was all part of a larger plan of worming his way in because he knew he caused this disaster. But it's only afterwards that I'm like, okay, yeah, no, he was a bit more nefarious than bumbling as I initially believed.
I don't know if I'm convinced, to be honest. I think he chose to do all this at the oil refinery once he didn't get the job because he's expecting a promotion. He goes to work thinking he's going to get promoted to foreman, and instead he's asked to transfer to another department for research. And he's like, "No, I'm an engineer. I'm expecting to be foreman." And the guy's like, "Oh no, we already promoted this other guy." And he's like, "Well, I'm not working for him." And immediately his like supervisor or manager goes, "All right, here's your papers then, off you go." And he's like, I was like, why don't you ask for the researcher job back? Like, you were just literally, like, you literally were just offered a role where it would take you away from this guy that you don't want to work for. Like, he wouldn't be your supervisor anymore if you went with this. But anyway, obviously.
He's not a researcher. He's in maintenance.
At this point, obviously, I'm not necessarily. I didn't know yet he was this as much of a psychopath as he turned out to be, because obviously he immediately then goes and starts just opening valves and like sabotaging the refinery, which of course it's a very dangerous thing to be sabotaging because it's all chemicals and oil and everything else. And I'm not convinced he actually intended to start a wider disaster. I think he just wanted to make their lives miserable. And it just so happens that what he does releases a bunch of chemicals or whatever into the sewage system. And then it runs down, through that. And there's a couple of maintenance workers somewhere in the city, in the sewer, who start using blowtorches. And the sparks, hit the thing. And this is a great moment, actually, because they get set on fire, and they both fall before they can get out, but it looks quite good as they're.
That was the first point in the movie, because obviously we'd had that smaller disaster beforehand, so they've already been around fire. But that was the first point in the movie where I was like, does nobody remember Stop, Drop, and Roll? Was that a thing that came out after the 70s? Because people in this movie catch on fire, and they're like, guess I'll just keep walking to where I'm going.
It looks better in the movie, though, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt.
that's the honesty of it. But
yeah, when you lay it out like that, though, yes, I don't think that he meant for the larger disaster to happen, because that does seem very serendipitous that it happened at all. But yeah, I think that his initial plan was probably, okay, I'm gonna mess up this place. I'm gonna go down to the hospital, and I'm just gonna once this dedication ceremony is over, I'm just going to be like, hey, we went to high school together. We want to chat it up a little bit? What do you mean, wife? I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it's important, though, when we say his plan, this is not something he was planning at the start of the day. This is a plan he forms when he's sitting next to his locker, when he's been fired already. And he just sort of has this eureka moment. Now, admittedly, though, if you told me that all he thinks of in this moment is to mess with the refinery out of revenge, which the other thing he does on his way out, which is far less severe, but he starts clocking everyone out just to be a dick.
Which, I mean, in terms of escalation, that seems like a down step, but whatever.
I think what's funny about it, though, is that this obviously is it's a nightmare in terms of the administration of sorting this out to pay everyone properly, but I love the idea. This seems like a normal petty I just got fired thing to do. I can sort of I wouldn't think he was a psychopath for this. I would think it was a bit petty and silly, but I'd be like, okay, whatever. No great harm done, really.
Him messing with all the valves and stuff was him getting back at that guy who was promoted to foreman. Because the foreman has to deal with that. Him messing with the time cards was him getting back at the manager.
Yes.
Who let him go, because that's going to be his headache.
Yeah, so of course, because everything blows up, though, 10 minutes later, it means that manager is probably dead, but even if he isn't, no one's giving a shit about those time cards after this.
I mean, I'm pretty sure no one's getting their last paycheck after that, but I do want to point out, I think it was after the main fuel line had really started setting off. The news program did specifically say that there were 3,000 dead at current estimates. So
after a bit of a montage of things. Yeah, that was quite early on. You said that.
So that's probably the biggest disaster we've had for this season. I think. I don't think Poseidon Adventure quite got up to that.
Technically,
but one thing that got me, though, was during the news program, they're like, oh, the fire has spread throughout the city, it's horrible, whatever. And as night falls, the looting begins. And I'm like, you're going the looting route? Really? All right,
I mean,
sure.
You say that, but how much looting did they show?
They showed absolutely none, because the only thing they showed is even a kind of example was the photographers trying to get back into their own house.
Yeah. So it was mentioned, but it's not like we actually went through much of it, if any. So, I will say, when the two sewer workers get set in fire, and then the fire starts to spread back up the water and the fuel line. It's not even a fuel line; it's just the water, but obviously it's just filled with fuel. That looked good, because it was literally just this river of fire moving up the water, and then obviously you get I think there's a guy who's doing maintenance on a big pipe, and the pipe just falls over and he falls to his death. That looked good. It's easily the best 5 minutes of the whole movie is this section where everything's just going off.
Yeah, I would say that probably even more so than the final set piece, this oil refinery explosion is the best looking part, because it is just concentrated, look at this.
Yeah, no, it's and just to get back to Herman, he basically just spends time kind of helping patients at the hospital as a helper, until he finds the photographs on the dead photographer. And it's like he's excited to have them, like, oh, like maybe he's going to use this to blackmail her into, like, because the last time he tries to talk to her is when she's literally helping a pregnant woman deliver a baby, and she's like, piss off, you stranger! I'm trying to help a woman deliver a baby here. And
it's like when he made his decision earlier that day to, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to that woman. Remember, one of his lines he used was, "Nobody listens, but I'm going to make her listen." That was his entire guiding point. And yet he picked literally the worst day to get anyone's attention. Yeah, of course, because of his own stuff. But
I mean, at least the wife's got a happier end. I mean, she'll never know that it's a good thing that her husband died, but like he had it coming because he did all this, and he was literally trying to line up his next wife. So like, so he basically just dies because he's walking down the street that everyone's walking down to evacuate the hospital near the end. And I really want to set up just the absurdity of this, is that the fire department in their trucks and all their hoses are, you know, like 500 yards, whatever it is, away from the front doors of this hospital. So it's literally like walking to safety. They're just there, like beyond the line. That's where they are. And once you get to them, you're safe. So he's just walking down this street, and this scaffolding that's on one of the buildings just falls down and like lands on top of him. Where I was like, oh, that's, you know, that makes sense. He needed comeuppance. He caused all this, blah 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 blah. And then like the nice enough nurse runs over to try and help him, and for some reason the movie decides she also deserved to have a horrific death when the rest of the rubble or like scaffolding falls on top of her.
If you care for the bad guy, you are also a bad guy. It's the absolute moral. Is that
the logic?
Yep, that's it.
She didn't know he was a bad guy, though.
Yeah, well, everyone else ignored him, so everyone else gets to survive. She actually listened to him.
She had empathy and sympathy, yeah.
Yep,
what a bitch.
And therefore she dies. Yeah, no, I don't think that him getting his comeuppance was a bad thing. I think, you know, in terms of the movie, I think it makes the most sense that he does die. But part of me does wish that, because they have a whole bit during the credits and shortly before where it's, you know, they've set up like a shanty town pretty much, all these tents and helicopters coming in. I kind of wish he would have survived just long enough for like the investigation to happen. Where they're like, how did this happen? It's like, oh, someone turned all the knobs on the oil refinery.
Well, just to get a moment where he realizes it was him that did all this.
Yeah, exactly. Even if they don't pin it on him, just so he's the one who knows it, he ruined not only his own life, but everyone else's.
I mean, I don't really care. I don't necessarily desire him to survive, but it would have been nice if the fact that he had stolen these photographs and like if at least he used them, like, not obviously he wouldn't finish his plan, whatever it is at this point, but at least like have him threaten to use them, or like, you know, like it doesn't go anywhere. Nothing happens with it. He's just holding them when he dies.
I mean, he was a bad person throughout the movie, but I never feel like he ever got to that point of like 100% irredeemable, disgusting throughout the movie, because he does the horrible stuff at the start out of frustration with his company, but then throughout the rest of the movie, all he's trying to do is literally just impress this girl. If he were to have done something with the photos, I think that would have been that extra step where it's like, okay, he is just disgusting to the core.
Yeah, I mean, he's very incel-like in the way he tries to, you know, woo
Which
Diana.
is weird that he has a wife, but, you know, whatever.
That's true, but he's not happy with his wife, though. He wants the rich, you know, subjectively more attractive wife.
Well, I forget the wife's name, but I'm sure she wouldn't have liked to hear that.
I said subjectively. I'm not saying I agree. I'm saying he clearly thinks this because he goes on about how every guy in school wanted her. Like, he says that a couple times.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So,
one thing I did want to bring up is if we're talking about the fact that nobody knows he did this, the very last lines of the movie are spoken by Henry Fonda, and he says, "All it takes is one man. It could be your neighbor or mine. One man to destroy a city." How does he know that? I don't... Who's... Like, is he talking about the mayor, maybe? That the mayor
could be
made
talking
the
about
oil
the mayor,
refinery?
who technically does share some responsibility for the fact that the infrastructure and the fact that the refinery was in a place that it would cause this much devastation if it ever had a problem. But I guess he's going for the whole thing. Like, I would say, like, see if it was a fire that spread mysteriously, because it was something really simple. Like, there's just one small fire and it spreads to the point where, like, it's so devastating that they can't stop it, right?
Yeah.
He would probably be right to assume that this is just one person or a small group of people, even if it's people at all, who started it. It may have been just an accident where, you know, like someone left a candle burning, there was a curtain, and it spread, and it was, you know, no one noticed it long enough that it became too uncontrollable, whatever. But the fact that it's from a refinery that, like, has this big disaster style accident would suggest that it's not one person's fault. Like, that would suggest that, I mean, it could be one, in fact, it is one worker who intentionally did something, but even if it was one worker who accidentally, you know, didn't notice a danger warning or something and didn't do their job properly, more than likely, though, it's the as a whole, there was an accident at the refinery. I wouldn't necessarily blame that on one person.
I mean, in fairness, it was an accident at the refinery because they get everything under control at the refinery. They are like, okay, turn off the alarms. We've got it all under control. They just didn't know that oil was being dumped into the water for so long that the welder sparks caused the actual explosion.
Yeah, like a mile or two away, you know, the spark was...
Exactly.
Yeah, because I assume on an oil refinery, they're all smart enough. Like, safety tip 101 is no sparks, no fire, nothing that could ignite anything, you know?
I mean, it's probably the one place in the 70s where cigarettes aren't allowed, but...
Yes. So, you know, I'm struggling, because honestly, the last, like, half hour of this movie is just shots of people going down. I mean, there's one funny moment where a stretcher falls over and two people on it like go tumble to the ground. Like that's all I've got for you, because otherwise it's just people walking down the street that's on fire.
Yeah. I mean, it is the first 30 minutes are the introductions and that first mini disaster. The second, like, I guess I'd say 45 minutes at that point, are the second disaster, the main disaster, and just hospital, let's fix as many people as we can.
Yeah.
And then the last 30 minutes is just, let's walk down the street in a calm and orderly fashion. One shot that I just remembered, they are loading people out. They're trying to get everybody out of this hospital because, and I want to get to this, they're going to suffocate before they burn, which is just a whole extra layer of excuse me. But they're going to suffocate, so they're evacuating as many people as possible. And as they're loading up one of these buses, a guy stops Diana and tells her that, you know, he's an old man, he's incontinent, and he needs to use his bedpan. So
I forgot
Leslie Nielsen steps up, they put the bedpan under him, and then Leslie Nielsen and Diana start having a conversation about getting out of there, but they don't focus the camera on either of them. They hold for 30 seconds on this guy pissing himself.
I assumed he was having a shit, to be honest.
Oh, okay, that's much better. My mistake. That's, yeah.
Because he looks like he's relieved. He's in comfort. He's so happy he can finally take that dump.
In that case, I retract my complaint. It's top storytelling. That's perfectly fine.
I mean, and the problem as well is that obviously you expect all this hospital stuff of, like, you know, the head doctor running around trying to, like, evacuate the kids, like patching up people where he can, but there's not really much of a through line for the characters. Like, the one thing that verged on, like, problem solving a disaster movie that I kind of could see being like a good plot point is that, okay, the fire is actually surrounding this hospital because of the location. That's terrible, and the communications are down. We have to find a way to let them know. And then ultimately, the sort of the loophole to, like, get through to them is that there's, like, a TV crew that's got in communications via radio to the TV station who are on the roof. They're filming shots, and that ends up being this communication line. And I thought that was going to be more of a thing, like more of a big deal, and more of a, we got through to them so we can warn them. And it's like it's achieved so quickly. in such a nonchalant way that doesn't feel like they've accomplished anything. You know, it's like, you know, in Die Hard, which is not a disaster movie, but I think this tracks as a comparison, is that there's a good chunk of the first half of that movie where it's about how John McClane's trying to contact the police and he can't get through to them. All he's got is this walkie-talkie. He's trying to get through to like an emergency service, and they give him shit because, hey, this is for emergencies. This line, like, this is not for civilians. And he's like, yeah, no shit, lady. I'm not ordering a pizza. Everyone remembers that line. So, so much of it's about him trying to get through to people, and he can't. So at that point, when eventually they send one patrol car out, and he's maybe not going to, he's going to turn around and go away, and he has a big cinematic moment where he throws out one of the dead bad guys and shoots at the car, just so that the cop knows, get back up, something's going down. They don't know the details yet, but that's like, he's achieved it. He's achieved the cavalry coming in, and this has got attention from law enforcement. And it's a big moment. It's a big turning point in the story where you feel like he's achieved something. His first main goal has been achieved, to get the police force and whoever else involved. They set this up in the movie. We need to contact the hospital to let them know that they're on a timer and they're all going to die if they do not evacuate. 2 scenes later, Leslie Nielsen hears, there's TV crew up in the roof. They've made contact already with the TV station? Oh, great. And they go in.
Even worse than that is I think that they realized the problem that you're talking about, that they resolved it too quickly. So in the scene where they are having the conversation, they like artificially stretch it out of like, can you hear me, Chief? Can you hear me? And it seems like the Chief can't hear him for all of like 10 seconds. And then they're like, no, I can hear you. I can hear you. You got to get out of there, Leslie.
Which really stuck out, using his real name.
Yeah.
Like that.
It was weird that Henry Fonda broke character at that point, but
he was pretty old. He was probably delirious. He's like, are we shooting a movie? What are we doing here?
I've been in this room for 2 days. What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah, it just like it felt like such a simple thing to set up as an obstacle that maybe it's not as simple as like contacting. I guess the problem is that the fire department immediately know that there's a TV crew there. Like, that's not something someone thinks about when they've been trying and failing to contact them. And then that's kind of the, oh shit, that's our smoking gun. There's a TV crew in there with radios. We can get to them via that way. He immediately just says, oh, well, there's a TV crew there. Call the station. So the station just do it. And that's it. Like, that's all it is. And there's a couple of scenes of Leslie Nielsen up in the roof talking via the headset to,
Which I do want to point out that they had this weird like matte painting thing in the background, like a special effect of the city. That is one of the weakest looking shots. It's not a city on fire. It's a city underneath the like Aurora Borealis. Like, it is just a bunch of red glowy things just moving about. Yeah.
So that looks kind of rough, but and some of these conversations are being broadcast on TV by the looks of it, and some of them aren't. It was unclear as to when. I
think all of them had to be on TV because there's no way for the Chief to see the other side of it, right? I think they all had to be on TV.
Can they not patch him in?
I mean, they patched him in on like a call to talk to him, but it didn't seem like... I think that all of it was on TV, also because the producer and the host seem very sleazy with how much they're willing to just completely do this for ratings.
Oh yeah, and there's no arc there. There's nothing where like, oh, maybe we exploited people's misery to get ratings at any point. The only plot that happens with these two is that she's a drunk, and the first couple of times she's on TV, like the producer's like, you can't tell, it's fine. And then halfway through the movie, she starts slurring her words, and he's like, damn it, you can tell. So there's a scene where he goes into her dressing room between segments and forces her into the shower for a cold shower to wake her up. And then she gets through the last part of the movie, and it's irrelevant that she's struggling or anything. Like, it doesn't matter. But she gets through it, and then instead of like her being like, maybe I don't need a drink, maybe because that would be the simple arc to do, is that she realized, you know what, everything that's went on today has been very serious. Lots of people have lost their lives. It's put into perspective my addiction. No, she says, okay, now this is over and we did it, and we did a national broadcast. Can I finally have that drink? And her producer finally says, yeah, I'm buying.
Not only did she not have an arc, the producer had a negative arc, and that he started the movie of quitting smoking, and by the end he was back to smoking. Things got just worse for them. They didn't learn things, they unlearned things.
Yeah, and again, like I'm not saying the movie needs to have like some big grand message, but it feels like you could probably do something with the idea of the media exploiting the tragedy. But
I mean, I thought that's the way they were going in that first disaster bit with the reporter literally coming into the ambulance, being like, "Where's the dead girl? Show me the dead girl."
And you even set this idea up that they can be instrumental in communicating to the people who are in danger that there's a problem, because they become like, this is the only way we can talk to the hospital is through the TV station's equipment. And it just kind of happens, and they never, like, this could be like, oh, this could be our redemption in a way, in the sense that, we can actually help them rather than just report on it. But nothing.
And in terms of aborted plots, I think that the worst one for me, because it felt like the one they were trying to put the most behind, was the love triangle between Leslie Nielsen, Diana, and the doctor. It seemed like they were trying to do that the entire movie, and in the end, Leslie Nielsen's just like, I kind of forgot I was a part of that, so I'm just going to be over here. And then the doctor and Diana just got together anyway.
I'll be honest, the doctor didn't even feel like he was a part of it either at points. Like,
yeah.
Like, they have a little bit of banter when they first see each other again, but for the most part, they're just dealing with a crisis, and then obviously they kiss at the end. Like, it never really... It felt like Leslie Nielsen was constantly trying to, like, be with her, and like, oh, let's go, Diana, we should go now together, we should stay together, Diana. He was always trying to maintain this affair that they had. The doctor didn't seem to give a shit. He just wanted to do his job. And that was pretty much it. Yeah. But then, of course, by the end, like, oh, maybe we can be... I don't know. Like, so many of the character elements are undercooked, and this is kind of... ironically, in a way. Like, they're undercooked, and they have no weight to them whatsoever. It, like you say, it sets up a bunch of things. It doesn't really do anything with it. It's not even just that it doesn't pay off them. It just doesn't do anything with them at all. Like, it's not even like it develops them enough and then doesn't have an ending. It doesn't even have the middle parts to any of these stories.
Yeah. I think the only character that managed to get the full way from here's the reason I'm here to I have completed the reason I'm here is the kid's bird. Because the entire point of the brother whose sister got caught in that house fire at the beginning of the movie, he brought a bird to the hospital to cheer up his sister. And the bird was literally there to be the canary in the coal mine of showing that they were running out of oxygen, that they were going to suffocate in there because the fire was burning too hot. That was the only character who was like, that's the whole reason I'm here, and I have completed that purpose.
I don't know if I get anything else to say about this movie. There's not a whole lot to it.
I mean, for me, the only thing that I really do want to drive home is the practical effects are great. The special effects are not. The characterization is even less so. And it has an oddly strange amount of comedy beats right smack dab in the this is the worst day of these people's lives scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're very isolated in the sense that it's not like it's trying to be a comedy generally. There's just like these odd moments on their own that feel like they've got a comedy beat. It's not like it's trying to be the big bus in tone. Like, the tone's still trying to be serious. If anything, one of the effective things about the practical fire effects and the people being set on fire is that it feels quite severe. It feels quite dark.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a striking image. Even after they do it like 10 times over the course of this movie, it's a striking image to see, whether it's the welders, whether it's people in the oil rig, whether it's that one woman walking down the street. It always is like a, wow, okay, they really set that person on fire. So, I mean, I'll always give kudos to that. It does, because nowadays, like, especially with how fast-paced stunts are and how many quick cuts there are, you can never tell, like, how long someone was actually set on fire for. They could easily have just been for, like, 1 second, get the shot, and then put out. But with that last woman, they held on that shot for a good 30 seconds of her walking down the street. Yeah. Just completely engulfed in flames. So they do put the effort into these set pieces. I'm not saying they don't. I just wish there was more story behind it.
Yeah, there's everything else that is on subpar. Like, that one thing about it is good. And it's probably enough that if you like disaster movies, especially 70s ones, that it's probably still worth watching at least once, but that's about it. Like, there's not really much more to it. So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't in love with the big bus, but this, at least it had its own thing going for it. This probably is definitely the weakest one we've covered in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. We'll see what happens with the next one, but this one definitely is probably weaker than anything else so far.
Yeah. All right, what are you rating City on Fire?
So it, I've been giving 7.5s over the course of the season. This one definitely strikes a lower tone. I can't really think of anything that it does extraordinarily well besides the effects. And that's just not enough to carry the movie as a whole. So I'm going to give this one I'm going to go 5.5. I think that the special effects bump it over the 5, but other than that, it's just completely whatever the whole way through. It's not horribly bad. There's no point where I'm yelling at my screen, why would you do that? But it's not good in any of those categories either. So 5.5 is the highest I could give.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with a straight 5, and it is the fire effects, it's the stunt work that puts it up to that midline, because the other things are subpar. There's almost like a fun bad quality to the idea of this nut job who starts it all, like,
oh yeah,
not intentionally, doesn't intentionally start all the fires, but he intentionally does something extremely dangerous that leads to all the fires. And then he's still kind of being this weirdo who's trying to stalk someone throughout the rest of the movie. Like, if you almost like ramp that up even more, it could have like a good like. It's almost like a disaster movie where like Borat starts like setting fire to the city to get to Pamela Anderson. Like.
I mean, I think that would, just in any sort of disaster movie where people are trapped in an enclosed space, I think having a pair of characters be a stalker and the person they are stalking is a beautifully, like, that has plenty of story potential in it.
Yeah,
this one just happened to do nothing with it.
No, I didn't do anything with it. Yeah, I mean, to the point where Diana, at no point in the film, ever realized that he was potentially a threat or was scared of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's never a scene where she's like, "Oh shit, this guy's creepy," and he's like, keeps coming up to me, he wants me or whatever. Like, she's basically unaware of his existence, other than getting annoyed and saying "piss off" in one scene.
Yeah,
she swats him like a fly.
That's literally as she's helping a woman give birth.
Yes. So any tension or drama that could come out of like him being a creep towards her, and the idea that, well, we saw what happened when he didn't get the promotion he wanted. So what dangerous thing could happen if and when he feels rejected by her? Like, right. We could be anticipating, or maybe he'll try to do something dangerous, but we never have that at all. So
yeah.
5 out of 10 for me. And does it make the cut? I assume that we're firmly saying no.
I mean, I'll agree. It doesn't make the cut, but it's really close to close. It's in terms of getting to the cut, it's just barely falling short. But like you said, it's good for like a single watch. I could not recommend buying this for any reason. So yeah.
So what we landed on then? Cutting it close or cut from the collection?
Oh, I'm cutting from the collection.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
I'm just saying, but if you happen to find this in like on a streaming service or something like that for free, it's not a horrible watch once through, but it wouldn't, in my opinion, be worth even like the $5 movie bin of shelling out for that. So,
yeah. Well, there you go. That is City on Fire. Movie 4 or 5 of this season of 70s disaster movies. Obviously, there's going to be a season 2 at some point down the line, but we got one more left in this season, and that is the China Syndrome, if I remember the title correctly. So,
yep.
Yeah, that's what we'll be doing next time on Collector's Cup. And then we're on to our next theme, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh boy.
All the live action movies, the 3 90s films, and then the 2 Bay produced features.
Strangely, I think that the lowest quality ones are still at the end of that.
So look forward to that. But we got one last 70s disaster movie of this current season to get through, and then we'll be on to that. But yeah, so as per usual, thank you very much for joining us, and you can support all the content by using the super thanks button, becoming a member on YouTube, or of course the most popular route is going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and you can get a bonus episode every month at the $3 and up tier, and help keep all the content coming. And there's voting rates at a higher tier and things like that. So go and have a look and see if you're interested in any of that stuff. And of course, you can support for free by simply liking, subscribing, commenting below, rate the podcast on iTunes, wherever you get your podcast from. All of it does help. And of course, look, check out the social media links in the description. Rather than saying one, because who knows what social medias are going to still exist at any given point.
Check us out on Mastodon.
Hive Social.
MySpace.
Does that still exist?
I'm sure in some form.
So yes, but that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and I don't have anything witty to say from this movie. The fire. The
fire rises.